That will wrap up for us what we have been calling 85 Days of Community. As we are celebrating our 85th anniversary, we did 85 Days of Prayer, and now we're in 85 Days of Community, and we're going to wrap that up with the beach baptism as we head into the summer. We are also wrapping up a sermon series that we started during this 85 Days of Community called This Is Us. And part of what we've been asking ourselves or looking at week after week is, who are we as a church? What is the purpose of the church? Why do we exist? And you know, that is a question that from time to time, every company, every organization asks itself. But if we're all honest, we've asked ourselves that questions too about our lives. Like, what is my purpose? Why do I exist? Why am I here? Maybe for you, it was at a time where you were finishing up school and you're starting to look for a job and you're trying to decide, hey, what am I good at? What is my purpose? What do I want my career to be? Maybe it was for you later on and you decided that career you were in isn't for you, and so you started questioning, what is my purpose? I did that. Maybe you had a family and you raised kids and the kids are older, and then you kind of got to that point where you're asking yourself, what is my purpose now? There are seasons in time in life where we all ask ourselves, what is our purpose? And this is actually pretty big business. The self-help industry in the year 2023 is estimated to be worth $41.2 billion with a B dollars. That people who are looking to understand what is my purpose in life are paying life coaches, and they're paying organizations like Strength Finders and image consultants to help them find what is their purpose in life. It's really, really big business, and it's growing because by the year 2032, some estimate that the self-help industry will be worth $81.6 billion. Now, what's so interesting about this to me is that as the self-help industry has grown, church attendance has declined. In other words, as people have stopped connecting with their faith and with faith communities, it has created a greater sense of what is my purpose and how do I find it. And so there's always somebody who's willing to take your money to tell you what your purpose in life is, because they found their purpose in life is to take your money to tell you what your purpose in life might be. So what is in fact our purpose? Interesting, I was looking through some articles about finding your purpose and what are some trends that are people saying about how to find your purpose. And I found an article by a lady named Jen Suddy, and she wrote 7 ways to find your purpose. And I'm going to read these 7 ways that she says you find your purpose. Number 1, identify what you care about. Number 2, reflect on what matters most to you. Number 3, recognize your strengths and talents. Number 4, try volunteering. Number 5, imagine your best possible self. Number 6, cultivate positive emotions. And number 7, look to the people you admire. Now, if you were counting, 5 of those 7 tips were all about you. Find what you like doing. Find people you admire. Find things you care about. See, the problem with this article and the problem with most life coaches, strength finders, image consultants, in the self-help industry in general is that they all start in the wrong place. They start with you. And all due respect, I know many of you, I love you, but you are a terrible place to start when you are looking for your own purpose in life. Now, one of the best-selling books in the self-help industry was actually written by a pastor, and this pastor's named Rick Warren, one of the highest-selling books. And here's how Rick Warren started out his book called The Purpose-Driven Life, with these words: "It's not about you. It's not about you. If you're looking for your purpose, you will never find it in you." And he quotes from Colossians, where Paul, this ancient letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the Colossians, and here's what he says in Colossians 1:16. "For everything, absolutely everything, above and below, visible and invisible, everything got started in him, and it finds its purpose in him." What is Paul saying to the Colossians? He said, everything got started. God started everything. Before God breathed and said, "Let there be," there was nothing. Everything got started in him. And so it is only in him that you will be able to find your purpose. It's only in him that we find the purpose for anything. Now, lest you think this is just strictly a Christian idea, There is an atheist, a very famous atheist by the name of Bertrand Russell, who famously said this: unless you assume a God, the question of life's purpose is meaningless. In other words, here's some hope for you. There is no God and there is no purpose to life. That's what the atheist teaching leads to. He openly admits what so few atheists will say, and that is, if there is no God, there is no purpose. And if you are looking for purpose, it must mean that you believe there is some higher power. There is some higher authority that gives purpose and meaning to life. So it stands to reason that the only way we are ever going to find our purpose is through the pursuit of the God who formed us. By pursuing the one who made you. Because if you believe that there is a God and that God formed you, then you have to believe that God formed you for a specific purpose. And if you are going to find that purpose, you have to find God. You have to find your purpose and your meaning in Him. I don't know how many of you may have been raised in a different faith tradition where they use the catechism. But the shorter catechism, which is a series of questions and responses. So one of the questions is, what is the purpose of humanity? What is the purpose of man? And the answer in the shorter catechism is, the chief end of man is to know God and to enjoy Him forever. The number one purpose of being a human is to know God who made you, and by the knowledge of God, then to be able to enjoy Him, not just for a season, not just for a lifetime, but to enjoy Him for all eternity. This is the purpose. This is the meaning of life. So in this series, This Is Us, we've been talking a lot about who are we as a church, what is the purpose of the church. Now here's what I want to suggest as we wrap this series up. If individuals can only determine their purpose by knowing God, then the purpose of the church has to be to help people know God and in God find their purpose and their meaning in life. The prophet Habakkuk said this in Habakkuk 2:14. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Now, if you think about that last part, as the waters cover the sea, it sounds a little bit silly or even redundant. How do the waters cover the sea? Completely. There is no part of the sea that does not have water. What is Habakkuk saying? He is saying that the earth, there is coming a point, there will be a time when the whole entire earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God completely. It will be totally saturated in the knowledge of God. Now, if you want to see how this was to be played out, you go back to the Genesis story, and you find that God created Adam and Eve in His image. And He gave them a command to go forth, be fruitful, and multiply. Now, what was this all about? That if God was going to put His image inside of humans, and then He was going to say, now multiply and fill the earth, basically what He is saying is, our purpose as human beings was to fill the earth, to cover the earth with the image of God. That every human was intended to be an image of God and to go forth into the creation and to be a steward of the earth, to be a caretaker on God's behalf. That we were given a purpose and a meaning by God because we were created in God's image. But you know the problem. Sin entered the picture. Because here's what is true. It was not just true of Adam and Eve. It would be true of you and I if we were given the same situation, because you and I want to determine for ourselves what our purpose is. I mean, that's one of the big problems we have, is I get to decide what my purpose is. The original sin that entered the picture was Adam and Eve trying to determine for themselves what their purpose of life was. God said, everything is under your dominion. I've entrusted it all to you. Just don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But they did eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because they wanted to determine for themselves what they would do, what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is evil. And you and I have the same tendency. I see it in my own life. I get a sense what God wants me to do. I don't really like that plan, so I institute my own plan. I'm going to do what I want to do. This is the root of the problem. And here's what happened. As sin entered the picture, what was supposed to be the image of God being multiplied and spreading across the earth actually became like a virus that spread. That sin began to spread. And rather than seeing the image of God, rather than all the earth seeing and reflecting the image of God, we have images of brokenness. And you still see this brokenness. You see it when you open the internet and you go to any news site or you're following any news story. You see and hear stories of brokenness. On individual levels and on social levels, you see and feel the brokenness. You feel it. You see it in your family. Whether it's a relationship problem, whether it's health issues, whether it's the economy, whether it's politics, whatever it is, we all find ourselves in the middle of this brokenness. But in the course of doing, there is something hardwired inside you, and it's hardwired inside of me, that says, I know this isn't how it's supposed to be. So how can I find what it is supposed to be? How can I find my true purpose? How can I find the real purpose and meaning of life? So what did God do? God intervened in creation, and he set apart a people. He said, you will be holy, and you will be a light to the nations. And so God chose this special people to be set apart, not to be different than and to be protected from, but to be like a mission into the world, to demonstrate the glory of God. And we all know the story. If you read the Old Testament, the nation of Israel tried and tried and tried, but constantly failed to reflect the image of the glory of God. So what did God do? God himself took on flesh and came and dwelt among us so that we could see the unadulterated image of the glory of God in Jesus Christ. That he is the perfect image of God. That if you want to know what God is like, if you want to understand who God is, you look to Jesus. Because here's the truth. You can't look to me and see that. I can't look to you. Even the best person you know is a flawed image of God because of sin and brokenness. But in Jesus, we see the image of God. And so what did Jesus do? Jesus began to call people to himself. He said, come follow me. And he said, if you will join me on this mission, if you will die to self, that's the story of baptism, buried with Christ in death and raised to walk in a new life. If you will walk with me in this new life, I will breathe into my church the image of the glory of God so that we can continue as followers of Jesus to capture the purpose God had intended for humanity from the beginning. That we would be able to display the image of the glory of God to the ends of the earth. And so Jesus, as he's walking on earth, he is living out his mission, and he is telling everyone what his purpose is, which, by the way, if we're followers of Jesus, his purpose should be our purpose. And here's what he said in Luke chapter 19, verse 10. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. He came to seek and save the lost. What does that mean? That means that Jesus said, I came to seek those who are not reflecting the image of God. The people who are lost and away from God, who don't understand and know God. I have come to seek those people. In Mark chapter 2, verse 17, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Now, this does not sound like a very good religious teacher to me. Because all the teachers of religion always say that they come for those who are religious. They are people who are already committed, people who are already in. Jesus said, I didn't come for those people. They don't need me. I came for the people who are far from God, who are not like God. My purpose in life is to display the image and the glory of God to those who are far from God, that they might see him and that they might come back to him and find their purpose and meaning as they learn to reflect the glory of God. Now, there's a set of stories that Jesus told that I want to look at this morning. If you have a Bible, look with me at Luke chapter 15, because I think these three stories, and they're probably the three most famous stories Jesus ever told, one of them in particular may be the most famous story Jesus ever told, and we read them, but what we fail to catch in these stories is the purpose that God is giving us as his children. That the purpose God has given his church and given us as individuals who are followers of Jesus. So if you have a Bible, look with me at Luke chapter 15. Now Luke starts the story out by saying there are two groups of people in the audience as Jesus is talking. And this is really, really important. Because when Jesus is telling this story, he is telling this story in response to these two groups of people. All right, so listen for the two groups. Luke chapter 15, verse 1 and 2. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. Why were the tax collectors and sinners drawing near to Jesus? Because Jesus said, those are the people I came for. Those are my peeps. That's my tribe. The sinners, the tax collectors, the people who are far away from God. Those are my people. And they were attracted. They were drawn to Jesus. in droves. So here they are, they're all drawing near to Jesus, but there's another group in the crowd, and the Pharisees and scribes grumbled. In other words, you have an irreligious crowd and you have a religious crowd. The irreligious crowd is drawing near to Jesus, and the religious crowd is doing what religious people do really well. They're grumbling. They're grumbling and complaining. And what are they grumbling about? Listen to what they say. This man, who's this man? Jesus. This man receives sinners and eats with them. Oh, can you believe it? What would your mom say if she knew who you were hanging out with? All these sinners and these tax collectors. Because this is the thing. These religious people think that their mission is to simply be and exist as if they somehow are the end and of themselves. They have confused God's purpose. They think it's about them. And it was never about them. It was always about these other people who have yet to reflect the glory of God. So you see these two groups that are there. And Jesus begins to tell them 3 stories. And the first story, in verses 4 through 7, is about a lost sheep. There's a shepherd, he's got 100 sheep. He looks around, he counts them. One of the sheep has run away. The 99 are with him. And what does the shepherd do? He leaves the 99 and he goes in pursuit of the one sheep. And he finds it and he brings it back rejoicing. And here's what Jesus said in verse 7. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. See, the focus was not on the 99 sheep. The focus was on the one. The focus was not on the scribes and the Pharisees and the religious people. The focus was on the sinner and the tax collector. That's where Jesus' focus was. And then he tells another story. He tells a story about a woman, and she had 10 coins, but she's lost one of her 10 coins. And so she tears the house apart looking for this coin, cleaning every corner, looking under every cushion. She's looking for this couch, this coin. And what does she do when she finds the coin? She throws a party to celebrate with all her family and friends that she's found the coin. And here's what Jesus said in verse 10. Just so I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. The focus was not on the 9 coins, but the focus was on the one. In fact, think about this. This woman threw a party to celebrate finding a coin. That means to throw a party, she had to spend some of the 9 coins she had to celebrate finding the 1 coin she had lost. Now that just sounds ridiculous. It sounds utterly ridiculous, but that's exactly the story Jesus told. And then he gets to the main story. He talked about a lost sheep. He talked about a lost coin. And now he's talking about a lost son. And this is a very familiar story. But I think it's familiar maybe for the wrong brother. And that's what I want to look at today. So look with me at verse 11. Here's what Jesus said. There was a man who had 2 sons. That's really important. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me my share of the property that is coming to me. And listen to this. He divided his property between them. That's really critical because what happened? What did this father do? He said, this is everything I own. My younger son is asking for his share, so I'm going to cut out his share. I'm going to give it to him, which means that everything the father has left belongs to the older brother. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there squandered his property on reckless living. Jesus goes on to say that a famine came into the town and that this famine caused all kinds of destruction, and this guy found himself destitute. So he goes and he works for a hog farmer. And one day as he's slopping the pigs, he realizes that these pigs are eating better than I'm eating. And so he develops a plan. He says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my dad and I'm going to beg him to let me work for him. Just let me be like one of your hired servants. Let me work for you. And so verse 20 says, he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And so the son starts to tell his father, I've sinned against you. And he starts to rehearse this speech. That this long journey he's had to get home. He's rehearsed this speech over and over and over again. He sees his father and he starts to recite the speech, but he can't even get through the speech because the father calls his servants and says, hey, Kill the fatted calf, bring the robe, put the ring on his finger, put shoes on his feet. My son who was lost is now found. This is what he says in verse 24. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. See, this is what Jesus talked about. This kid who had run away was not reflecting the image of his father, but he had come home. And Jesus said, this is what it's all about. It's about the sheep that is found. It's about the coin that is found. It's about the son that comes home. But this parable isn't just about the younger brother. Because the story starts out with, there was a man who had 2 sons. And we often stop the story when the younger son comes home and the father lavishes his love on him. You know why we do that? Because we all want to see ourselves as the younger brother. Now, maybe you've never done anything that rebellious. Maybe you've never taken and squandered your inheritance. You probably don't even have an inheritance. But you have all, as have I, we have all been at a place where we have willfully rebelled against God. In big ways and in small ways. We have all found ourselves living out and slopping the pigs and coming to realize that I need to return to God. And so we come home and we call it the prodigal son, and the prodigal son comes home and we get to be the hero of the story. Because the younger brother is a story about us. And isn't that what we want it to be about? We want it to be about us. But what if we're not the younger brother? What if we're the other brother? The older brother. See, because meanwhile, while the younger brother is out squandering everything he has and taking advantage of his father's generosity, the responsible son, the good son, is out working in the field. And all of a sudden he hears this noise of celebration. There's a party going on. And so he sends his servants and says, hey, go find out what's going on. What is happening in there that I need to know about? The servants come back and they tell him what's happening. They said, your brother has come home and your dad is throwing a rager. He is so excited. He has killed the best calf. He has brought out all the best china. He is sparing no expenses because your brother is home. And now you should come. And the father says, come in and celebrate with me that your brother's come home. But look what Jesus says in verse 20, it happened. But he was angry and he refused to go in. He refused to go in. You know, I think this story has another important element to it that we often ignore. And that is, I want you to think for just a second. I want you to think about this parable in terms of God's kingdom and God's hope of heaven. And I want you to think about the person who hurt you the most, who betrayed you, who took advantage of you, who lied to you, who stole from you, who abused you. And I want you just to imagine for a second that that is the person sitting at the table in God's heaven. And you have to ask yourself, would I still go in? Would I still go in? Would I accept that God's mercy and God's grace is sufficient for even my very worst enemy? Even the person who wronged me. Would I accept that? Because here's what is true. If you cannot accept God's grace and mercy is sufficient for your worst enemy, then you'll never be able to accept that his grace and mercy is sufficient for you. And it won't be God sending you to hell. It will be you refusing to receive his grace because you yourself could not accept a grace that you were not willing to give. Your capacity, this is so important, your capacity to receive the mercy and the forgiveness of God is completely dependent upon your capacity to demonstrate it and to live it out. This is why Jesus taught us to pray one of the most dangerous prayers that ever has been breathed. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. In other words, don't forgive me any more than I've been willing to forgive my worst enemy. That's a dangerous prayer. And that's where this older brother was. See, this older brother, it was all about him. I've been the good son. I've done everything right, he said. And he refused to go in. So notice what happens next. I love these next 4 words. His father came out and entreated him. You see, we often think about the father's grace towards the younger brother, That as the younger brother's coming home, the father runs to meet him. But the father didn't just go to meet the younger brother. The father also had grace and compassion to go toward his older son as well. That it is God who is in pursuit of you. Whether you are living away from God, in rebellion to God through your disobedience, or whether you are living in rebellion to God through your obedience, and you can do both, it is God who is pursuing you all the time. Same God, same heart for both sons. So he comes into him and he entreats him. But he answered him to his father, "Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your commands, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." And he said to him, now catch this is really important. "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." What did the father say? All that I have is yours. Remember when he divided the property? He gave half to the younger brother. Everything the father had left at that point rightfully belonged to the older brother. This is why the older brother was so mad. Because what the father said is true. All that I have is yours. Which in the brother's ears, in the older brother's ears, what that meant was, yeah, when you took those shoes and put them on my no good brother, those were my shoes. When you put that ring on his finger, that was my ring. When you killed the fatted calf, that was my fatted calf that you killed. Everything you have done for him, you have taken out of my share of the inheritance in order to be good to him. Because everything you have left, Dad, is mine. It's all about me. It's all about me. And what the father wanted his older brother to see is it was never about you. It was always about the heart of a father who loves so extravagantly, so lavishly, so recklessly, that he would spend everything to find his lost son, to celebrate the lost coin, to rejoice over the lost sheep. See, this is what this story is all about. These stories remind us that if you want to know the heart of a father and you want to identify his purpose for you, the first thing you have to realize is it's not about you. And it has never been about you. The church is not about you. Your family is not about you. Your job is not about you. Your money is not about you. Your cars, your house, none of it is about you. It is always about a father whose extravagant love will go to any lengths to reach one more person who is far away from him, so that we all might live out the purpose that God gave us, that we might reflect the image of the glory of God, and we might enjoy him forever. So, what does this mean for us? We've been talking all month long about the purpose of the church, the purpose of Aspire Church. The church exists for the glory of God and the benefit of its non-members. That's the purpose of the church. That the church exists primarily for the glory of God. For this God whose love is so extravagant that he would not spare his only son, but he would give him that we might know him, that we might receive his love. You see, unlike the older brother in this parable, we have an older brother who was willing to give up everything so that we could come home to the Father. This is the sacrifice Jesus made for you, and he made for us. And it's the sacrifice he has invited us who are following him to make as we live out his mission on the earth. The church exists for the glory of God and for the benefit of its non-members. Archbishop William Temple in the early 1900s said this: "The church is the only institution that exists primarily for the benefit of those who are not its members." I'll never forget, several years ago, I was serving another church and had the opportunity to teach, and I quoted Archbishop William Temple, the same quote. And I talked about how the purpose of the church was not for its own members, but for its non-members. And I had a very uncomfortable meeting with the elders after that. Because they said, but membership has to have its privileges. And I think that may be true in a country club, but it is not true in the Church of Jesus Christ. Membership in a church has its responsibilities. Membership has its requirements. That we lay aside our desires and wants for the purpose of bringing glory to God and by reaching those who have not yet heard. The church exists for the glory of God and for the benefit of its non-members, but unfortunately, way too many churches, especially in the West today, have perverted this idea, and that their statement would look more like this: the church exists for the glory of its pastor and for the benefit of its membership. The glory of its pastor and the benefit of its membership. And we wonder why people are leaving the church in droves, why they're not being attracted in. Because as long as the church is about the glory of a leader and the benefit of its members, it is no different than the rest of the world. It is no different from any other human institution on the planet. The purpose of the church is for the glory of God and the benefit of its non-members. So here's what I want you to do. And as we wrap this series up, here's the challenge I have for you. And I take it as a paraphrase from President Kennedy's inaugural address. Ask not what your church can do for you. Ask what you can do for your church. Ask not what your church can do for you, but what you can do for your church. Now, if that sounds too churchy because you think, well, I'm only here, a few hours a week anyway, let me challenge you to say, this actually applies to every area of your life. In fact, I will challenge you this week, if you will take this principle and apply it to every relationship you have, your week will be radically different than last week. Here's how you do it. Ask not what your spouse can do for you. Ask what you can do for your spouse. Ask not what your parents will do for you. Ask what you will do for your parents. Ask not what your children will do for you. Ask what you will do for your children. Ask not what your boss will do for you. Ask what you will do for your boss. Ask not what your company will do for you. Ask what you'll do for your company. Ask not. Ask not what somebody's going to do for you, because here's the thing. It's not about you. None of it is about you. It is all about the glory of God and the mission that Jesus gave us. And if you will live every aspect of your life and every relationship you have this way, it will radically alter your vision, not just of the people that God has put around you, but it will change your understanding of who God is and what God has done when you were the lost sheep, when you were the lost coin, when you were the lost brother. See, the older brother was waiting for his father to do something for him, rather than just participating in his father's celebration of his brother's homecoming. He had the same exact attitude towards his younger brother that the scribes and Pharisees had towards the sinners and the tax collectors. And listen, church, this is so important. We risk the same attitude when we fail to see that the church exists to fill the earth with God's glory until every lost sheep is found, every widow rejoices, and every prodigal child has been welcomed home. That is what we're called to do. If you are a member of this church, if you're a member of any church, if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, you were saved not because of your good works, but because of His grace to welcome you home. But there's another aspect of salvation that we don't talk enough about. We talk about the fact we have been saved, but the Bible also talks about the fact that we are being saved. And I don't know about you, but I need that. Like my salvation at 9 secured my eternity, but I wake up every day and find something in my life I need saving from. A thought, a habit, a hang-up, an anger, something in my life I need saving every single day. Do you know how that kind of salvation works? It's called reciprocal salvation. Meaning that as I engage in offering others grace, I receive grace. As I forgive others, so I am forgiven. As I serve others, I find I'm the one being served. It's reciprocal. As I'm living out the Christ life, not for my own glory, not for my own good, but as I'm living out my life in service to the glory of God and to other people, what happens is I find incrementally, day by day, degree by degree, I am being transformed into the image of Jesus. Because it's not about me. It's about Him and about what He wants to do in my life. This is one of the reasons last week we introduced this Aspire to Serve card. Many of you filled it out. Some of you, if you still want one of these, you can get it outside. But we say, one of the ways that you can find your purpose is by exercising the opportunity to serve other people and to serve the needs of others. So as we wrap up this series, This Is Us, we get to the very end, and here's what I want to tell you about this, about who we are. This is us. It's not about us. It was never about us. It was always about Him and about those who have yet to know Him. Now, during this series, every week we've been challenging you to get deeper into community. We've challenged you, if you don't know Christ, put your faith and trust in Jesus. Follow Him in baptism. If you're not a member of a church, join a church, this one or another one, but get involved in a church. Every week we've been challenging you to get connected in community. But today I want to give you a warning. If you are joining us, you need to know that the minute you join us, it is no longer about you. Because this church exists for the glory of God and for the benefit of its non-members. So the minute we join, we are joining to say it is no longer about me. It is about the one lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost brother. The church doesn't need more people who think the church is about the glory of the institution or the benefit of its members. It needs people who seek to live for the glory of God and for the benefit of a lost and dying world. That is a mission I can give my life for. That is a church that I can spend myself for, knowing that nothing I serve, no way I serve, nothing I give is ever lost, but it is invested in the eternal kingdom of God.